Hi, my name is Julie, and I am one of the co-hosts of Gone But Never Forgotten with my husband Lance. We focus on stories of people who have gone missing and have never been found, and those that have been murdered and their cases remain unsolved. We give a voice to those at the center of the story who have yet to be found or yet to have closure. Take in the stories that we bring to you and help to ensure that the subjects of these stories, while gone, are never forgotten. Search for Gone But Never Forgotten on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you take in your podcasts.
We are Wendy and Beth, and we host the podcast Fruit Loops Serial Killers of Color. Tell the people about the show, Wendy.
Well, happy to. As you might have guessed by now, our show focuses on serial killers of color. We decided to make this the focus of our show because most of the podcasts that we listen to focused on whole white serial killers, also male, cisgender, hetero serial killers. And we thought the space could use a little spice, a little diversity.
Yeah, and we believe that the victim stories are important. Many of the victims are also BIPOC folks, and the media just doesn't focus on these people.
We also get plenty of opportunities to discuss race relations, systemic oppression, policing, history, and culture. We learn something new every day, and we hope that you do too.
Join us as we tell the fascinating stories of these crimes that often go untold by the mainstream media. Subscribe or download Fruit Loops Serial Killers of Color now on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.
Darkcast Network. The light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
Welcome to Cause of Death, 100 Seconds to Midnight. These episodes address the doomsday clock and the events that keep it ticking down, and things that we can do to stop it. The doomsday clock has been set at 100 seconds to midnight since 2020. It's 100 seconds to midnight, and people from all over the world are volunteering for humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. Today, I'm having a conversation with my friend Lisa Smith. Lisa is a veteran, a city councilwoman in Arvada, Colorado, and a humanitarian. Lisa went to Poland to help get supplies into Ukraine and get refugees out.
This is Lisa.
Hi, Lisa. This is Jackie Moranti. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great.
Well, that's good. It's been a while since I chatted with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear this story because this is going to be, it's going to be really interesting for other people to hear it because I don't think anyone really understands what's going on over there. You know, that's half a world away.
Yeah, totally. I think that's the feeling I've gotten as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, you know, you can watch it on the news and you can go, well, maybe that's happening or maybe it's not, or maybe, you know, nobody trusts the media right now. And I've been trying to get the story by using Ukrainian media that's been translated into English. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that doesn't work out so well.
Yeah. I think the translation's always hard. I know when we were over there, we were always with a translator because, I mean, there's several different languages being spoken: Ukrainian, Russian, Polish, English. So it's certainly not helpful.
Right. So what I'd like you to do is, if you would just introduce yourself, tell a little bit about yourself so that people know who you are and why I'm talking to you.
Awesome. Well, yeah, so, you know, my name is Lisa Smith. I am an Air Force veteran. I served up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I was military police there. Our proper term is called security forces. I became a social worker after attending CSU and really loved working with older adults, disabled people, and specifically around policies. So I, you know, started working up there and then moved down to Arvada, Colorado, where I ran for office and became a city councilwoman. The big thing that happened, I think, around 2013 was the floods that hit Longmont and Lyons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those floods kind of triggered me working in the disaster space arena. So I would do floods, fires, hurricanes, a lot of different natural disasters, and we also pivoted a little to humanitarian disasters. So I was able to do some work in Greece with the Syrian refugees, and most recently I was able to deploy to Poland and Ukraine and help in that crisis and war right now.
This wasn't a military effort, was it? It was more of a humanitarian effort?
Yes, it's more of a humanitarian effort because U.S. and NATO forces aren't allowed to go into Ukraine. So what we're seeing is a lot of volunteer and humanitarian work there, a lot of veterans going over and working alongside Ukrainian forces. But yes, it's all humanitarian.
And how did you get involved with that? Who did you contact?
Yep. So with Team Rubicon, the organization I started with when the floods hit in Colorado, I stayed with for several years and volunteered through different scenarios and situations. And the co-founder, William McNulty, launched an operation in Poland and Ukraine responding to this war. And that was kind of how I got tied in. It was people I was connected through with Team Rubicon.
It's really necessary for people to do humanitarian efforts over there.
Yeah, I think it gives a different perspective on life. I think sometimes we're in our own world, we're in our own environment, and things that look stressful to us, maybe in the grand scheme of things, are not as stressful as others would say across the world. So I think it certainly helps gives perspective.
Oh, I agree. I absolutely agree.
Well, I think, everyone has a different place, a different role in the community. Some people wouldn't do well going to austere environments, and some people, have a better role of just donating those funds and giving it to people that know how to do it and how to help. So I think everyone has a role in the humanitarian and kind of general world of giving.
What were you doing over there?
So my role, to be frank, I didn't know what my role was. I just knew a couple of my friends had asked if I could come help, and I said, sure, I'll be on the next flight. And I think it was maybe 8 hours later, I was flying to Frankfurt and connecting. So really wasn't sure what my role was, and it was a small lead team, so we did a lot of different roles. My job was mostly working on evacuations, so we would work on getting medical supplies and building out these emergency combat kits. They're called IFACs. And we would load up the vans, and we'd buy the van because we are not able to bring any of our rental vans or vehicles over the border. So we would take those vans filled with medical supplies, drive in, and our partners that were staying in Ukraine, we would pass those off. And once we unloaded it, we were able to go to the train station to pick up refugees, families, children, women, load the van up with them, and then cross the border into Poland. And then we would drop them off at a reception center where they would get registered, they would get the resources or get information and push forward to where they would go next.
And do you know where they would go from there? Would they just go to refugee camps in Poland?
No, not really. Those reception centers aren't there for the long term in the sense that that's where they'd be staying. It was more of a 1 to 2 day staying place, and then they would move forward. So when you would walk into those reception centers, they were huge. They were like a mall, and there was different resources, different countries. You'd see different flags and nationalities. And people would go to that flag and they would try to get to Greece or Portugal or Spain. And so it was very much like a triage center. And then they would move forward. There's a lot of organizations that are working on housing, resettlement, refugee applications. We partnered with Airbnb to get 30-day vouchers for people fleeing. So those reception centers are kind of that central resource point for refugees that were moving forward.
That is really amazing. It's amazing what's going on over there and how they're trying to get people out and keep them safe.
Yeah, it's very, very grassroots. That was something that, when you think of these crises, you think of UNICEF and the UN and Red Cross, and they're there. But the majority of people on the ground that you're seeing are different organizations, smaller ones that are just trying their best to collaborate and find housing and centralize a lot of the resources and information.
If you wouldn't mind, at the end here, I'll give you my email address. If you wouldn't mind sending links to those resources so that people can donate, because that's a lot of what this whole story is about.
Yeah, of course.
You actually went into Ukraine?
I did.
And were you in a part where the fighting was happening?
So a lot of the supply chains that we do, because it is grassroots and a lot of the NATO and military forces can't go in, is we create our own supply chain lines. We create our own network that we could pass things along. So I essentially was moving from Krakow to Lviv, and that would be our hub that we would drop it off and pass it off to people that were far more badass than I was. I would go even further in. So while we were in the country, and yes, the city got bombed while we were there, and I think it got bombed yesterday as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an active war zone, but not in the sense of, street combat that you were seeing. It was more of that aerial strikes.
Okay. And that had to be scary.
It was, but at the same time, I was kind of looking in the lens of, well, I'm not, in Eastern Ukraine, which is much worse. So I kind of justified that to calm my nerves of, this isn't as bad as other places, and, it'll be fine, and you're around people that you trust. So, we had plans and evacuation routes and such.
I figured that you had some kind of plan in mind.
We had safe houses. We had places that we would go. We had egress plans. So everything was set up, but we tried to go in and out as quickly as we could.
Oh, absolutely. The people that you were bringing out, was this like more smuggling people out, or did everyone kind of know that people were being evacuated?
No, it was all of the routes that people are driving through the Polish borders. It's, for refugees primarily that you're seeing in supplies. So everyone knew what we were doing. There was tons of other volunteers that were also helping transport. The concern around the transportation with volunteers is that a lot of them just came on their own accord and were trying to evacuate people, and that led to some bad actors that would, traffic the people, that would put them in vans and go, and then not bring it to the reception center. And there was a big concern there. That's actively happening. So there is a little bit of unofficialness in some of the transporting, but, all these people had their documentation that we would take, and they would process and cross the border legally. But there also were people that were just bad actors that we would have to keep an eye on.
I wondered about that because that's a huge opportunity for trafficking and smuggling and, some scary stuff.
Yeah, and there's been stories of complete buses and vans of these women and children that just have disappeared, and, haven't been found yet. And so we have to be really meticulous about how we're going about it.
That's really, really scary because you don't know where those people ended up.
Yeah, and I think it's a big risk they're taking. So when we would go to the train station, they didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I would do. And so they were really just trusting in humanity that we were good people and we're going to do good things.
On one hand, it had to be really amazing for them to get where they were going and be able to trust in humanity, because I think that at this point, a lot of those people can't.
Yeah, you would see this evolution of emotions almost with the people we were taking, where they would get into the van and be very nervous. They weren't talking, very observant. And then when we would get to the border, you would see them kind of relax a little bit, maybe start talking. But the majority of the time, they were not sure what was happening. A lot of these people, they weren't just coming from Lviv. They were on their third day trying to get out of the country, exhausted, and only had a bag. Some of them had animals with them. So I can only imagine what they were feeling.
Oh, yeah, that had to be so horrifying for them. And
yeah.
Did you get a chance to talk to any of them, or was it just more in passing? Did you get a chance to even do a little bit of chit-chat or calm their nerves? Or
Yeah, when we would get to the border, when they would see that we were going through the process, they would start talking or chit-chat a little bit. It was a several-hour process to get across the border, so we had lots of time to kill in the van.
Oh, that's good. Well, and I'm sure that by the time that they realized that everything was okay, they felt a little bit better.
Yes, I would definitely say they did. And once we dropped them off at the reception center, there was certainly a feeling of relief. There was a lot of hugs, a lot of thanking. A couple took pictures with us, and it was interesting because you gave them a hug, maybe you took a picture, and you wished them luck, and you really have no idea where they're